now outside the home of Madeline Smith here at Blythswood Square. Madeline was the daughter of a successful Glasgow architect called James Smith, and she had a very privileged upbringing. She was educated in London and came back from London from a finishing school. And in 1855, whilst walking with her sister Bessie on Sucky Hall Street, she encountered a very dapper looking Frenchman, as she thought, and he was called Pierre-Emile Langelier. He actually came from the Channel Islands. He gave a note to Bessie asking her to get an introduction to Madeline. This soon followed and became a full-blown affair. Now, Langelier, it's important to know, was from a working class background. He worked for a seedsman's company in Glasgow, but Madeline was very much a middle class girl, and the romance was doomed from the start in many ways. However, it did develop, and in the ensuing year 1955 into 56 it became very intimate, and part of that intimacy was recorded in letters between Madeline and Pierre, and it was those letters that were to lead to the downfall of Madeline come the trial. Now, Pierre would come and visit Madeline from his lodgings at Franklin Terrace over in Great Western Road, and he would walk along this length of pavement where I am just now, and this opening here was the opening into the kitchen of the Smith household. The Smiths occupied the first floor, or the ground floor as it were, and the sub-basement of this property. This was the kitchen. It's now bricked up. But Pierre would tap the kitchen window with his cane, and he would be handed out cups of cocoa or hot chocolate, and it's believed that within the cocoa or hot chocolate was grains of arsenic, which was to ultimately lead to Pierre's death. Madeline shared a bedroom with Bessie, and that was the next two openings on this same stretch. Following one night where Pierre received cocoa at the corner, he went back to his lodgings, was very sick, and passed away. On the 23rd of March in 1857, Pierre-Emile Langelier returned to his lodgings here at Franklin Place, just at Great Western Road. He was doubled over in pain and had to retreat to his bed, and sadly he passed away. And this began the investigation into how Pierre-Emile Langelier had died. Having died a horrendous death from arsenic poisoning, Pierre-Emile Langelier was laid to rest here at the Ramshorn Kirkyard in Ingram Street in Glasgow. But if you're visiting the kirkyard, don't look for a headstone bearing the name Langelier. He is in fact buried in the Stevenson family lair, who very kindly accommodated the corpse of Pierre. Here I am at number 17 Sandyford Place, and this property was owned in the 1860s by a family called Fleming and looked after by the father of the property. The father was known as Old Fleming. He was 87 years of age, and also in the property lived a servant girl by the name of Jessie Macpherson. And in 1862, Jessie Macpherson was found horribly bludgeoned to death in the basement where she lived. And that's the window tucked under the stairs just over my shoulder. A friend of Jessie Macpherson's called Jessie McLachlan, who lived at Broomielaw and who frequented the house as a friend, she was later charged with the murder and served 14 years in prison. It's widely believed, however, that the true murderer of Jessie Macpherson was Old Fleming, and it's believed that she had pushed aside his sexual advances and it led to him beating her to a horrible death. Behind me is Bertley Terrace, and this was one of the addresses at which Dr. Pritchard lived with his family. And it was here in 1863 that a young servant girl called Elizabeth McGrain died in a fire. And it was further investigated, and very likely she was the first victim of Edward William Pritchard, although he was never prosecuted for her death. In 1865, the Pritchard family had moved here to Sauchiehall Street, and during that time Mrs. Pritchard fell ill. She became poorly, and her mother came through from Edinburgh to take care of her. Upon her mother's arrival, and a short time later, within 3 weeks, both the mother-in-law and the mother, his wife, were both dead of poisoning. Edward William Pritchard was found guilty of the murder of his wife, his mother-in-law, at Edinburgh in front of 3 judges. They sentenced him to be hung by the neck until he was dead. And the hanging took place here in Salt Market, just behind me, on the 28th of July in 1865. It was often said he would die facing the monuments. The monument being the Nelson's Monument in Glasgow Green, about a quarter of a mile from where I stand. In 1908, Oscar Slater came to Glasgow, and he rented a flat just behind me above the door of the bridal shop at the corner of Woodlands and St George's Road. I'm standing at number 49 West Princes Street, which is just off St George's Road, and it was here on the 21st of December in 1908 that Miss Marion Gilchrist was bludgeoned to death in the first floor flat above my head. Police eventually arrested a man called Oscar Slater, who had went to America, and they went over on a ship and brought him back. Now, Oscar Slater was charged with Marion's murder and was found guilty. He then served 19 years at Peterhead Prison and was eventually released due to the work of John Trench, who was a detective inspector with Glasgow City Police, and also Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Oscar Slater did not murder Marion Gilchrist, but he spent a long time in prison for something he did not do. It was a complete miscarriage of justice.
That's my bedroom.
That's where the murder happened.
Did you know that?
Yeah.
Oh my word.
Okay, have you had any spooky things? No?
The door opens itself all the time, but that could just be...
Are you serious?
No, apparently, no.
Like, all the time.
Yeah.
That's cracking.
A number of years ago there was
I
workers
love that.
doing work on the flat,
Yeah.
and they wouldn't eat their lunch. They would come out into the stair or go down on the front steps. They thought it had a bit of a feel about it.
We don't envy you staying here, I have to say that.